It's just 7 o'clock now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wait until 7. So we'll kick this off. We don't seem to have any other planning board members here yet. So I'm just going to start off and I'll handle this appropriately. Okay, so welcome to the Town of Easton MBTA Communities Multifamily by Right Zoning Public Information Session. As some of the attendees may know, we've been working on creating some possible zoning to accommodate the state requirements that we have some as of right multifamily zoning in town because we happen to be adjacent to some NBTA connections. So thus far, the Planning and Zoning Board has had several meetings to kind of discuss the topic and get some ideas together. Prior to that, a group of town officials and residents put some ideas together to kind of give us a way to start off with this. And tonight we're going to show you where we are now. We're not making any decisions really soon. This is a great time to hopefully get some good input from the public, and we can adjust accordingly. The way we'll structure the meeting tonight is that Judy Barrett from Barrett Planning Group will give us an introduction to the new state requirements. Then Stephanie Danielson, our Director of Planning and Economic Development, will give us, kind of go over what we have put together so far. And then I just plan to, really just open it up to the public to gather some input. So, in respect for everyone's time, we'll all keep our comments, concise, and hopefully all the attendees can do the same. And we don't really have a hard stop, but I think, an hour and a half would be a good spot to kind of start winding down, unless the discussion just is so great that we have to keep on going. With that, I will start off with introduce Judy Barrett of Barrett Planning Group. Judy, can you give us a little introduction on where you're coming from?
Certainly. I'm happy to be here this evening. This is not my first time in Easton. I've had the pleasure of working with the town on a number of initiatives in the past. My role in this case is to assist the planning board, our planning and zoning board, with presenting to the community what the MBTA community's zoning law is about, how it works, and work with Stephanie Danielson on presenting to you, some areas that the town has been looking at. So I think without any further ado, I will just start our slides so we can give people information and hopefully have time for some questions and discussion. Just give me a minute to get these going. So this is, of course, about the MBTA communities law and Easton and opportunities for Easton to comply. The slides are fairly self-explanatory. I'm going to do an overview of the MBTA communities law and the compliance framework that the state requires communities to use to demonstrate that they will comply. And then Stephanie's going to talk about all the amazing things the town has done so far to work toward compliance. I would have to say Easton really, in a lot of ways, is ahead of the game and has done an extraordinary job trying to prepare for the town for compliance. So, good for all of you for doing all that you've done. So this, of course, is an overview. I'm going to give you basics. Some of this you may know. You may have heard pieces of this before. I'm going to try to put sort of a whole picture together for you. This map shows you kind of all the communities that are subject to the law that went into effect a couple of years ago. It was actually part of an economic development bond bill. And sometimes people say, why, how does this have to do with economic development? And what I think we all know as planners is that you can't really have a healthy economy without people being able to live in your community. So these things all kind of fit together. What that economic development bill amendment did was establish a new section in the State Zoning Act. The State Zoning Act is Chapter 40A. You may hear that reference in this presentation again. The specific section is Section 3A, and you will hear that again too. It applies to 177 cities and towns around Boston. And the intent of the law is to reduce local regulatory barriers to multifamily housing. So you are an MBTA community if you fit into one of these categories. The rapid transit communities are kind of the original set. Those are the communities right around Boston that have an MBTA rapid transit service. Most of them are kind of highlighted in blue on that map. There are 51 more that host some kind of MBTA service, typically commuter rail. There are many more of you that are considered adjacent communities, and that includes Easton. And then there are some other smaller towns that are, that are sort of adjacent to the adjacent communities, if you will. And so they're classified by location. And although every community is required to comply, the compliance requirements are a little bit different depending upon the kind of community that you are according to the guidelines. And that really is a function of what kind of transit service do you have from the MBTA, either in your community or next door. So what the law says is any town that's in that district, that on that map I just showed you, is required to have a zoning district that allows for multifamily development as of right, meaning there's no kind of discretionary approval process. A town board can't really turn it down. Of course, you can review the project and review the plans and make sure that the project is going to be safe and effective and efficient and so forth. But it's an as of right permitting process. You cannot impose any age restrictions on those units. You can't impose bedroom restrictions, and you can't regulate the number or type of occupants. Generally, if you have land within a half mile of a train station, you are expected to place much of your district there. If you don't, then it's sort of a what else would make sense. So city or town centers, village center areas, those kinds of locations are all kind of what planners would consider appropriate locations in the absence of an actual transit stop. And the district must be of reasonable size. I'm going to break all this down in a couple of more slides, but this is just the umbrella of what the law says. Now, the law is interesting. It doesn't require certain things. It doesn't require housing to actually be built. Unlike many laws, such as Chapter 40B, for example, which really rides on production. Section 3A of Chapter 40A is about having the zoning in place to enable something. Whether a developer takes advantage of that zoning is really the developer's problem. It's not the town's. The law does not require you to pay for infrastructure to support housing that might be developed in a Section 3A district, which is what I'm going to call this from here on out. The law does not override the State Wetlands Act. It doesn't override Title V of the Massachusetts Environmental Code. It also does not provide for any waivers or exemptions. So pretty much if you are subject to the law, you are subject to it. And again, the requirements vary somewhat depending upon what kind of category your town is in. And as I said, you are considered an adjacent community. So the state has a role in this. The state has a couple of things it's doing. One, of course, is we have this law because the legislature adopted it. And I think that's just important to understand. It is the law. The Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, which many of us used to call DHCD, HLC's obligations now are to develop guidelines, which they have done, and also to determine whether communities comply. In order to determine whether you comply, there have to be standards and guidelines to sort of tell you what you need to do. And so their job has really been to produce those guidelines. They have amended them a couple of times. But right now, the guidelines that we're working with are pretty clear and probably won't change in a substantive way, I think, for a while. Their job is also to kind of enforce the provisions of non-compliance. So what the law says is that you are simply ineligible for certain state grants if you don't comply. There is also just a recognition that it is the law. So if you're not in compliance, you are violating state law. Those different categories of communities I mentioned earlier have different deadlines to comply because you are an adjacent community. You have until the end of next year. Like most communities that fall in this category, they're already kind of looking toward next year's town meetings and trying to make sure that they're in a position to have something to go to town meeting, if not in the spring, then certainly in the fall. And there are a few communities that are actually trying to do it this fall as well. So I want to talk just a little bit about the guidelines and give you a little more detail that will probably help you understand some more of what you're going to hear when Stephanie talks about the various locations that the town has been looking at. So there are certain things a potential 3A district must have. It must have zoning that allows for at least 15 units an acre of developable land. And developable land is determined by that compliance model I mentioned earlier. It's an Excel-based model. It's pretty sophisticated. It allows a community to look at a set of parcels and determine how much of them are probably developable, and based on that, to be able to estimate what the density of development would need to be in order to comply with the law. There is also a minimum unit capacity. So in addition to having at least 15 units an acre, the sum of the units that could be built or could be proposed in those districts has to equal a certain number, which is really just it's a percentage of your Census 2020 year-round housing count. And I'll give you those numbers in a minute for Easton. The district has to be of reasonable size. And what that means in HLC's guidelines is that's the lesser of 50 acres or 1.5% of your developable land, except for those very small towns where it's calculated differently. You have a minimum unit capacity that again varies by municipality. At least half the district must be contiguous. So naturally the guidelines, if the goal here is to have effective zoning for multifamily housing, you wouldn't want to have a district that's comprised of a lot of disparate parcels that really wouldn't constitute a decent development site. So the law says, in addition to being reasonable size, at least half that district must consist of contiguous or adjacent parcels. And then for any of those contiguous areas, for them to actually count, they have to be at least 5 acres. The goal is to have meaningful development sites for multifamily housing. This law has an interesting concept embedded in it, and we call it zoned capacity. Zoned capacity means how many units could be permitted in this district by right if the whole thing were to be built out. So it's a hypothetical number, but again, it's based on a percentage of your year-round housing units. So, or your total year-round housing supply rather. So for Easton, your zoned capacity is 913 units. And what that means is that whatever land ends up in the district must be regulated in such a way that not only do you meet at least that 15 unit an acre requirement for density, but the zoned capacity of all those areas together would have to be 913 units at minimum. Zoned capacity is not limited to vacant land. There was, I know early on, some confusion about that. Lots of communities are looking at putting these districts in places where perhaps some redevelopment might occur of a tired asset that would be a great way to reuse an existing building. So it's not limited to vacant land. And again, there is no requirement for the town to produce actual units. So there's no requirement for construction. It's a requirement for zoning. Very different. So if the town receives an application to build under one of these districts, the town can require site plan review, which is essentially a land development permitting tool that allows a planning board, a zoning board, whoever is the entity administering the law, to receive a plan, a development plan that has a lot of information on it about utilities, about roadways, about parking, about what's this site going to be. And it's a very objective kind of technical review. So it isn't the kind of review where a board could say at the end of it all, no. A board could impose certain conditions on approval. So you would look at things like access, safety, cars, people, making sure that there's a safe separation between different types of users on a site. You can certainly look at exterior architectural design, but again, the criteria have to be very objective. So, fairly lofty or general terms around design desires generally won't fly, but you can do a lot with pretty objective standards. The applicant needs to know what he or she needs to do to submit a plan that can be approved. And then things like screening of adjacent properties. These are all pretty standard things that take place in site plan review. And you are certainly entitled to use that process to review an application in a 3A district. You can't use site plan review to deny a project or to impose conditions on it that would essentially make it impractical to build. Your communities can require up to 10% of the units to be, quote, affordable in a 3A district. You can go higher than that, up to 20%, but you have to be able to demonstrate that your zoning will not make multifamily development infeasible. I mean, you have to be able to have a percentage that's reasonable. So the state's assumption is if you're not asking for more than 10%, that's fine. If you want to go over 10%, you have to document that that's not going to hurt multifamily development in your town. So Easton's requirements, kind of in a nutshell, you are an adjacent community. Your 2020 housing count, according to the census, was 9,132 units. Therefore, the minimum zoned capacity of your district under Section 3A is 913 units. It's 10% of your census 2020 housing count. Your minimum district size is 50 acres. Your minimum gross density is 15 units an acre. And none of the units have to be within an MBTA station area, as that term is defined in the guidelines, because you don't have a station in your town. So Stephanie has a lot of information for you about what has happened specifically in Easton to prepare for this point. So I will continue to advance the slides, but I'm going to turn the presentation over to Stephanie.
Okay, thank you, Judy. So one of the first questions people are asking, Judy covered it. It's the law, we need to comply, but there are other reasons that the town should be complying with this zoning requirement. First, it helps Easton achieve its housing goals to meet the housing needs of its community. In the Affordable Housing Trust Action Plan for fiscal year 2023 through 2027, one of the goals is, the first goal is increasing availability of affordable housing options for families and older adults and maintaining existing affordable housing units. The second goal is to continue to promote diversification of housing choices. And this is, would provide housing options that are sought within the community. One of their priority initiatives, the second one, is to ensure more housing that's affordable for seniors and families among the outcomes of implementation of the multifamily zoning requirement. Easton's master plan, Envision Easton, talks about matching opportunities for housing with the needs of all of Easton's residents. Judy, if you'd advance that. Okay. So our U.S. Census data for Easton shows the housing inventory increased 1,000 units between 2010 and 2020 to approximately, well, Judy mentioned this, 9,132 units in total. Prior to 1990, Easton's number of multifamily dwelling units totaled around 283 units. Since 2012, Easton has added around 709 units of multifamily housing. Of those units, all but 30 were the function of either friendly 40Bs, comprehensive permits, or the 40R development that everybody knows as Queeset Commons. So the town was really working to increase the number of affordable units, our subsidized housing inventory, but also to increase the number of multifamily to meet a need. The demand for multifamily housing in Easton is strong, and that's demonstrated by the fact that the housing complex, such as Avalon, the Shovel Works project, the smaller unit on Washington Street, all operate at capacity, occupancy capacity. Judy, the next slide, please. If you're looking at this slide, you'll see that between 2019 and 2022, home values in Easton rose by 34%. That percentage is higher than our neighbors, Mansfield, Norton, Sharon, Foxborough, and West Bridgewater. To property owners who are looking to stay in their homes for a long time, this is an opportunity for them. It builds their equity in their housing. But for people who are looking to downsize and then stay in Easton and buy a home, it makes that process challenging to find an affordable home that is meets their current needs and helps them stay within the community. It also makes it difficult for young professionals, the working class who work within the community, new families to come to Easton and find affordable housing. Next slide, Judy. Judy talked about the state funding programs that are tied to compliance. Easton has benefited significantly from these programs since 2011. You can see we have a list here, MassWork grants that include street and roadway improvements in the Northeastern Village and along Main Street. The Furnace Village Sewer Project helped to reduce the betterment fees that were charged to the residents for that project, and that project moved forward and completed. And the planning for the roadway improvements along Foundry Street, the roadway and traffic management improvements. So it really benefits Easton to comply and remain eligible for those projects. Those funding programs. Next slide. And as Judy said, it's the law. The Attorney General issued an advisory that all MBTA communities must comply. If you fail to comply, you may be subject to civil enforcement. And the law, as Judy pointed out, doesn't provide a mechanism. There's no waiver, no opportunity to opt out. Next slide. Okay, so what has Easton done to prepare? As part of the compliance process, each town was required to have its administrative body hold a public briefing session to discuss and understand the zoning requirements. That occurred back in January of 2022. At that time, the planning board, the select board appointed an implementation review team. That team consisted of chairs of various land use and relevant administrative boards and committees, including the Finance Committee, the Planning Board, the Select Board, the Affordable Housing Trust, and the School Committee. That group met on a bi-weekly basis between February and March to discuss the requirements, how they would affect Easton, and talk about where there might be likely areas to focus. They also developed some guiding principles, and some of those principles talked about protecting Easton's open space, leveraging the work that the town has already done in zoning for mixed use development, multifamily opportunities, meeting its housing goals, and protecting its open space. In March, the committee presented their findings and conclusions in a report to the select board. They also had gathered comments on the guidance, and that was submitted to DHCD on March 29th. On the 21st of October, the Department of Housing and Community Development issued their final guidelines. In September of this year, the planning board began actively discussing the potential districts for consideration. There had been some conversation with the planning board between October 21st of 2022 and this September, but the conversation began in real earnest in September. And on October 2nd, the planning board opened the formal public hearing for the process. And tonight is our first public information session. We plan on holding 3 other public sessions, and at the end of the presentation, we'll talk about the dates for those meetings so you can start putting them on your calendars and letting your friends and family members know. Okay, next slide. So again, I'm not going to reiterate the requirements. Judy covered them quite well. Easton's proposed parameters for the zoning in the zoning district would be front yard setbacks that would be 30 feet, side and rear yard setbacks of 25 feet, a minimum of 30% open space on the lot, and a maximum dwelling unit of 15 units per acre. 3 floors, 45 feet in height, with 2 parking spaces required per unit. And there would be no restriction on minimum lot size or acreage. That would allow the developer to figure out, based on the setback requirements, the minimum open space percentage, and the number of floors, how to configure the site with the number of units. Next slide, Judy. So the board is currently considering 3 areas in town, and they went through a process of thinking about those particular districts and why they would be suitable for this type of development. I would say the first 2, the Eastman Foundry District, potential district, and the Washington Belmont potential district, are in areas where the town has already zoned for denser development and for a mix of multifamily and commercial. And I'll talk about commercial in a minute after we go through this, or mixed use development. So the Eastman Foundry site, we've identified an area that is a total of 68 acres. And the multifamily unit capacity calculation using the state's compliance model would yield 1,021 units. It meets the minimum requirement that at least one of the sub-districts be 25 acres in contiguous acres. It has access to municipal sewer, which is a benefit. It's walkable to a variety of services, amenities, open space, and passive recreation. So this is the area off Robert Drive and Foundry Street where Avalon already exists. It would be included in the district. The Hannaford Plaza, which consists of the Big Y and several retail stores, the Starbucks, the Target. So you have a lot of commercial activity going on right there that people living in the district could avail themselves of and benefit from living there. It also demonstrated an ability to accommodate higher density with commercial use. Now, you can't require the commercial or mixed use development as part of the guidelines. You can provide a density bonus. So you could say, if you're going to provide additional units, or would like to provide additional units above the 15 units per acre, then we would require that you have some commercial in that mix. Washington Belmont Street, 28 acres in total. It would yield 479 units. It meets the minimum requirement of the 25 contiguous acres. It does have access to municipal sewer, potential extension there. There is access to outdoor passive recreation. The Eastman Foundry Street actually is in very close proximity to two of Easton's conservation management areas. That's not the case with Washington Belmont, but it is across the street from the Stonehill campus, where there is opportunity to walk through their campus area, and anyone who's been there, it's really quite nice and lovely. And it is walkable to a variety of amenities and services. And we also had interest expressed by some of the property owners that they would like to see the development, the zoning in that area. Washington North is the area around, and let me just explain, the Washington Belmont area is, it extends from the marketplace on Washington Street north and around the corner to Belmont Street up to where Belmont Arms is located, and that is existing multifamily housing. The Washington North area is the area around Roach Brothers, and I think everybody knows generally where that is. This area was selected for a couple of reasons. Again, it would meet the minimum requirement of at least one of the subject districts being 25 contiguous acres. It is a prime location for expanding the district, the MBTA zoning district in the future, when or if the South Coast Rail actually moves forward in coming through Easton. The preferred alternative, even though at this point they have extended that spur to Taunton and Fall River, and we don't expect that happening anytime soon. But if it were to move forward, the town would have to have a district within the half mile of an MBTA transit station. It's also walkable to amenities and services, but not quite to the same extent as Eastman and Washington Belmont. Judy, if you would. So this is the Foundry Eastman Street area. And you can see where Robert Drive is. You can see, and I'm going to, let's see, I should be able to pull down. Judy, do you need to give me permission to do annotation?
Judy, you're muted.
I've done this sometimes and I haven't had to. Well, I think you can see.
It's not actually my Zoom account that this is on, so I don't have any permissions other than what's been given.
Okay, and you know what? It might be down here by the shear. No. Okay. All right. Well, you can see it's marked as Robert Drive. It is upside down, so it may be a little bit difficult to see, but you have in the north corner, there is the Avalon development. Then you have the Target, which is the white building right underneath it. Yeah, Judy, that's good. And then to the left is a warehouse that's active and being used. And then you have the plaza just to the right of that. Okay, the next slide, please. This is the Washington Belmont Street District, and you can see the familiar shape of the marketplace, which is this almost like a spaceship. It goes up and around the corner. You can see as you move to the northeast, right across the street is part of the Stonehill campus. We've included an area that is currently, again, an active manufacturing plant. And then just to further to the northeast, you have the Belmont Arms residential development, a little more to the right, Judy, that parcel. Yep. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, and then if you click forward, we'll get to the final one. And this area, you can see Roach Brothers Way. And this is the area where the train station would be proposed, generally to the west here. And you can see that's developed with the Roach Brothers Plaza and several medical office buildings along the northwest there. On the right, to the right across Washington Street are existing townhouses or condominiums. And I talked about affordable housing and the need for affordable housing, and especially for people who are aging, want to age in place, sell their homes and move somewhere smaller in Easton. A lot of folks, I was talking with the age-friendly community committee the other day, they feel that condominiums would be a great option. And that would be one of the multifamily options that could be constructed in any one of these districts. And that would meet a serious and growing need in the town, both for families that are just starting out and would like an ownership option, as well as seniors who are looking to stay within the community and have something of some aspect of their housing be fixed cost. Okay. And the next slide, Judy. So this is where Peter, if you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Judy and Stephanie. There was some great presentations there. So I think just to kind of explain where we are in the process now, is that, we're not really expecting anything to possibly go to the town meeting until, the spring of 2024. So we have, we're going to have more public information sessions. We have plenty of time to look at this and gather more input. Right now, the planning board, is preparing to put together a kind of a baseline that the state can look at it and tell us if that would even be in compliance. So there are a few like milestones that we have to reach, but the finish line is quite a ways off, and really the deadline is the end of next year, not this year. So Stephanie showed us a few zones. Nothing has been decided upon. We know we're not deciding to put everything in one area of town. That's why we have options, and that's why we're having these sessions to see what people think. There's a real balance there between kind of keeping the town the way we think it is now, or the way we want it to be, and but also kind of looking to the future. We all probably know some, a family member or some friends that might have found like one of the multifamily units a good fit for their lifestyle, depending on where they are in life. I know I certainly do. So with that, I have one quick question for Judy, and then I'm going to go straight to the public. Judy, what have some towns that are considering non-compliance? What are their thoughts, and like what are they expecting down the line at this point?
Well, we're not working with those towns, so anything I know is kind of second or third hand. I think there are some communities that feel that they've already done a lot to provide housing, and they've kind of done as much as they can. I think there are some communities that feel that this is just another, mandate imposed from the state, and they're not happy about it. Those are kind of the two threads I tend to hear the most. Either we've already done a lot, we can't do more, or we just don't think the state should be telling us how to regulate land use.
So they don't really have a strategy. They're just more or less just going to kind of see where it leads.
I think so. I think that really is kind of the plan, that they're
Mhm.
just gonna not do something until someone probably makes them. I don't know how far they're gonna carry it out. I just don't know.
Okay, yeah, so the way we'll kind of start soliciting some public input here is you can ask a question in the Q&A, or you can raise your hand and we can promote you and you can ask a question in person. If you do raise your hand and we recognize you, please state your name and address for the record. That's a, it's requirement of open meeting law.
Do you
If you
want
happen to be on
slides?
your phone and you'd like to make a comment, you could press *9 on your phone, and that will kind of put you in the queue to be recognized.
Do you want to
So
take the slides down for now and we can just bring
Yes.
that up later? I think
Yes.
that's a good idea.
Yeah.
So let's start with anyone who would like to raise their hand and ask a question, and then we'll go to the Q&A where people have been typing in a few questions.
Okay, Peter, I just want to make a couple of comments, and we have
Okay.
two hands raised. I thought we had three.
Okay. Oh, I see.
First, when I allow someone to speak, if they would please state their name, full name and address, so we have it for the record. And then, Peter, once someone completes, because if the hands keep raising, I want to make sure we get to people,
Mhm.
I will go to the next person, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, it's usual discretion to allow others, as
Yeah.
as others complete. Maybe just kind of mute others so that we kind of maintain some order here. So
Yep.
yeah.
So I have a phone number first. It's 781-752-7811. I will allow that person to talk, and if they could state their name and street address.
Hello, 781. Yep. Oh, there you go.
This is Ross Greenfield from 29 South Street. First, I just want to state that I'm opposed to the having the Eastman location due to the traffic and just the overall volume. The speed on 106, it's too much. And has the town considered what the overall budget is going to be for the services that would be expected? I mean, the rate's going to go up, trash pickup, snow removal. No.
Well, thank you for your comments. So is your question whether rates will go up as part of if some of this new zoning comes to fruition?
Yeah, right.
What are the factors affecting that? I don't really think there's like any data that's going to kind of give you a direct connection to tell you what will happen, but we know what's happened from the past. And Stephanie, what trends have we recognized?
Yeah, so if I could, I'm going to answer pretty basically. I mean, new development generates tax revenue. Because it's multi-family zoning on individual lots, I don't anticipate that there will be, it's not like a subdivision where you're creating new lots and a roadway that would be accepted by the town. So I think that it would be on site responsibility. It would be the property on operators, managers that would be responsible for the snow removal. And then your other question, let's see, was the revenue. I think that generally answers it. I mean, the same with trash removal.
Yeah.
And people in Easton pay.
Yes, so we pay for the trash, and
removal,
you would
right?
think that,
So,
just on the trash, you think that more volume would actually get us a better rate because we'd
Right.
have a better leverage to negotiate our contract.
right,
And the
the
trash has
property,
kind of stayed, the trash bill has, because I have one, has stayed about the same over the last 10 years. But
yeah, I mean, as you add people to the system, they need to pay as well, so.
Okay.
Okay, we have Dale Carrister.
Hi, Dale Carrister, 21 South Street. I have a few questions for Judy. And Judy, thank you for taking your time to participate and provide this information to us. My two basic questions are, number one, directed to the Eastman district itself. And then second, I have a series of questions about the process by which districts were recommended for consideration or not. First, as to the Eastman district, it's currently identified as 68 acres, with up to 1,021 units in that area. My understanding is that the town is actually now considering, rather than trying to put it all in one district, namely the Eastman district, that they're considering either 2 or 3. Has anybody determined whether that 68 acres should in fact be reduced, for example, to 25? So in conjunction with at least one of the other districts, that you would then have a total of 50 rather than having 68, because given that it still is appearing as 68, it gives the impression to folks that the town is pushing towards having the choice be all in the Eastman district, or perhaps, some type of splitting up.
Yeah, so Mr. Carrister, I'll answer that right now. No, all options are on the table. The 3 districts that we proposed have been put through the model preliminarily, so we have some data and numbers to run off of. You can go all or none, you can go do 2 out of 3, or we could modify the districts further. So that's why we're having these sessions. We can't just keep on making changes and ask the town staff or hire a consultant just to keep running, new permutations through the model, but we can make changes at this point.
Okay, so if I could just comment.
Peter,
on
if
that,
I could I add to that as well?
Thank you.
I mean, one of the reasons, and I think, Dale, you heard it from one of the other planning board members at one of the earlier meetings, the Eastman Foundry area was selected because of its location, because it's demonstrated with the Avalon, the 15 units per acre can work in that district. And it was part of one of the target growth areas in town. So that was another reason for looking at that area again. And it's in close proximity to a lot of services and recreation opportunities for residents that might live there.
Right, and I'm not arguing against having a district over there in the Eastman district. I want to be very clear about that. I am arguing against having one area in town, whether it be the Eastman district or the Roach Brothers or the Belmont or anything else, be the entirety of it. So, no less than 50 acres. But I really want to get back to the question of the 68 acres is, do you expect that when this is considered further, that there will be an option for the Eastman district of something less than the 68 acres?
Well, since I'm the person that is one of the 5 people that gets to vote for it as a planning board member, I would say yes, that's very possible.
Okay, because I certainly would recommend it, because otherwise you're putting something forward and then the impression would be from other parts of the town, well, why don't we just shove it all, down there in that district, do all 68 acres down there. And I think to make it a realistic option of having multiple districts, there should be an option on the table as to what that would look like, how many acres, and what it would consist of. So I'll move on to my next set of questions, which is just the process by which the various districts were considered. And a couple questions for you, Judy. What, if any, role did you have in making any recommendations to the town, number one? And number two, one of the first slides that you showed said as a principal criteria would be, where possible, to have a district that would be within half a mile of a town, a train station or something similar to that. The only one that potentially could ever qualify for that now really would be the Roach Brothers area. So can you explain what your thoughts are regarding the desirability of the Roach Brothers area as being one of the districts, especially considering that parameter of locating something within a half mile? And I think you also mentioned that if not that the statute seemed to encourage having something within a village area, a village center area. And really none of these other districts that are currently under consideration would satisfy that second criteria, being sort of in a central village area. So can you speak a little bit about your role making recommendations to the town and how we arrived at these ones being considered now?
I can. I actually was not involved. To the town's credit, they got on this faster than probably any community I know of. So I was not involved at the time. I was hired recently to help the town with basically public information between here and town meetings. So that's mainly my role now, but I am a planner and I can tell you, a number of the communities we're working with are looking at like 2 or more locations for their 3A district. Not every town is, but some of them are looking at kind of breaking it up. In part, so people don't feel like it's all being put in one part of town, in part because having a couple of different areas meets some other planning objectives of those communities. So every town is trying to wrestle with this as best they can based on the goals of their existing master plan, their housing plans, or whatever. And I kind of think that's what Easton has done. As for the selection of an area that's not within a train station area, let me just explain that what the MBTA communities guidelines consider a station area is within a half mile of a train station. So if you don't have land that's within a half mile of a train station that's developable, you're not considered to have any train station area requirement to meet. Therefore, it's really up to the town to decide, well, what areas in our community would make sense based on established development patterns. If you have a village center or a downtown and there's land available, or it just makes sense to put a district there, then a town could do that. But it's really kind of up to the community at that point to decide, I guess, based on their existing planning, what areas might make sense to look at. And I think that's what Easton did.
Yeah, and actually, I just looked it up. So from Roach Brothers to the Stoughton train is 2.8 miles. From Big Y to the Mansfield train is 4.7. So that's you can do the math, about a mile difference there. Yeah, so Dale, as you know, we did put a variety of options on the table here so that we can have a good discussion about this. And one of the criteria that we used was we were looking at places where multifamily was already allowed under the zoning bylaw by special permit, and places that had already been built out, to a certain extent, like the Foundry Street area, where it's very unlikely that Avalon's going to be raised and be turned into more dense multifamily in any time soon, right? And probably for Target and the Big Y Plaza as well. I mean, we could think of possibilities, but that's probably, it's more probable that those would not be redeveloped anytime in the near future. So go ahead. Do you have more questions?
We have Jessie has raised her hand. I'm going to
Okay.
allow Jessie, he or she, I'm sorry, if they could just.
Jessie Blaze, 3 South Street. My concern with this is we still have building in the old Belcher's Foundry going on in Buckley's property. How are we going to handle this traffic on 106? I mean, as it is, I can't get out of my driveway. So there's no sidewalks on no sidewalks on 106.
Yeah, so the Paquonicket light is scheduled. Is it more or less quite definite?
We think it's going to be spring, but it will be moving forward.
But that's still not going to help me. That's going to bring more traffic down Paquonicket by my house. Now you're going to add all these more apartments.
Yeah,
I mean, 106 can't handle it. We don't have sidewalks.
Would you like us to answer your question, or would you like to keep telling us about the sidewalks? So the town is in the early phases of getting some state funding under the state highway program for kind of a better complete streets build out of the exact area that you're talking about. Stephanie, where is that project in the
so that's thank you, Peter. That's in the pre-25% design phase. We've mentioned this in previous meetings. It is an 8 to 10 year project. We know that, but it has been added to the transportation improvement program. So we know Mass DOT will be moving forward with it. The town is making the investment in the design. That's one of the requirements of receiving funding through the state, through the TIP program, is that the state do the early engineering. So that's underway. That will result in pedestrian improvements. What I'm being told is there is going to be a sidewalk on the north side, a multi-use path, which is bikes and sidewalks and walking path is how they refer to it on the south side. And there will be traffic management improvements along the road. There have been studies that have been done that the additional vehicles, due to the large number of vehicles passing on the road, the numbers that we're talking about at various times during the day, adding to that traffic should not be significant. But we understand the concern. We understand
You
that
know,
it can be difficult to travel and turn out from
your
various.
driveway, your
Correct.
driveway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so that's
And my
right.
big thing is, so how many years are we gonna just keep on ripping up 106 and we have to live through this construction?
Well, if you want it to be improved, then, then it takes time to improve the road, right? I mean, I live on Depot Street. We just improved it and yep, they tore it up and they replaced it and it's better. So, how many years? I think after this one, it would probably be, that would be good for a while because no one's going to give us more money for it anyways. But no, we understand your concerns and, that's why we're trying to, you put some different options on the table. And, but your concerns are very valid. Maybe some people might wish that we just didn't have to do this at all. I don't think that would stop more development, in that area regardless, but that's just my opinion there.
So Peter, I don't see anyone else raising their hand. Do you want to go for the Q&A? Can you see the Q&A, Peter?
Yeah, sure. So JR 25 South, why all the housing are being built in one part of town instead of all around town? I think we addressed that we have 3 areas on the table and we have the ability to modify the existing areas. So that's why we are gathering input, and we have just gathered a lot of input from the Foundry Street residents. So has a traffic impact analysis been done? The answer is no to that. We'll get into that in a little more detail. We live on Route 106 and the amount of existing traffic is significant to say the least. And like I said, I know I live on Depot Street. Choosing Eastman Foundry would not be able to handle the additional traffic this would bring. So, to do a traffic study for, a build out that could never happen or could take 50 years, wouldn't really be a wise use of our money, right? I mean, I don't know, Stephanie, what are your ideas? Or Judy, what do you think? How are other communities handling that?
You made up your mind it's gonna happen.
Well, I think at this point, I think it's difficult to, again, to do an analysis without knowing what the development would be. Peter, we do have some hands raised.
Okay.
Maria Wilson. Oh, I'm sorry. Jonathan Joyner raised his hand first.
Good evening, everyone. Jonathan Joyner, Lamplighter Lane, Easton. Thank you for taking the time to speak with everyone today and share everything that you're sharing. I'm a relatively new resident to the area, so I'm not really familiar with the past, what's happened, and I've seen kind of what's happened with Depot Street. Major concerns, and I understand that the biggest concern I come to see from the people in the area is obviously the traffic situation on 106. I get that. I mean, 106 is a major state. I understand it's a state road. I mean, it's a big connection point between 24 and 495. One item that I think should be taken into consideration with, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that the town's voting on a new public safety and a new centralized police department, fire department, and water, and I'm sorry, it's a public works station off Depot Street. The road construction on 106, shouldn't that be taken into consideration, not just for traffic, but for public safety issues? I mean, put aside the fact that there's no sidewalks. I know recently unfortunately there was a death on that street a couple months ago. I think there's major concerns for just strictly public safety. I mean, traffic's traffic. I mean, there's traffic everywhere you go, and I understand that just give yourself more time to get from point A to point B. But I believe that public safety should be taken into a consideration, especially with the increased volume on 106. And it's not just people that are eastern; it's people that are cutting across, maybe from 24 to 495 or vice versa, right? So I would consider that being a more of a bigger issue than, say, the traffic.
No, yep, yeah, you're right. I mean, I see the Rhode Island plates, driving by my house, and also my wife works in Rhode Island, so she drives right down that road every day. So you're right about that.
Yeah, and again, the roadway improvements do include public safety. That's the reason for the sidewalk, the multi-use path, bicycle lanes.
It is.
And will with the proposal of the new centralized police fire station, public works department, will that create more concerns with congestion if you're adding a light? I believe forgive me if I'm wrong, but where the new sawmill complex is going on 106 as well. Is there any concerns on that?
I don't have the number right in front of me. Connor Reed, the town administrator, did recently talk about the number of trips, and
Yeah.
again, that would be coming out of the station. And again, it's not a significant number. I want to say 8, but I don't think that's eight a day. But that has been looked at, and that answer you probably can get from the EPS website. But we will also get an answer to that, and we'll post it to our Q&A.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks. Great questions.
All right, I had Maria Wilson. So here we go.
Maria Wilson, 16 South Street. I brought it up at the last planning board meeting with regard to the MBTA, that we don't even know what the impact of the sawmill with the 11 units being built on where the dentist office is, the sawmill, the Buckley property, the 2 units that were built on the corner of 555 Foundry, plus the 2 new houses, plus a piece of land being sold, plus a house being sold on Foundry closer to Target Street, plus a piece of land there. We don't even know what the impact of that traffic is going to be on 106. And I just feel like we put the storage in because we needed it, and all we're building is houses. There is no commercial based property being built, and now we're being forced to add more houses, and the traffic is already horrific. It's just beyond me that we can continue to just keep adding and adding when we don't know what the actual impact is currently in our area. It is bad. I mean, I moved here 30 years ago, and when I tell you I am trying to take a right off of Pequannock, and I know you told me, and I've asked, and it's been discussed for years, but it's been like 3 long years that we've been waiting for a traffic light at the end of Pequannock. That doesn't help us during that time while we wait patiently for a traffic light. Traffic is only going to get worse. So I am like pleading that you have to really take into consideration the density that has been shoved down our throats. And we're footing the bill for this storage that we were told was going to be commercial base, that was going to bring commercial base. The only commercial base we've gotten is Aroma Joe's, and all we bring to the table is houses. Please, can you advise me how we can change this and how we can make this better for our community? You talk about walkable, you could get killed on 106. Killed on 106.
Yep. Okay.
And I can't say it any other way. I'm like so passionate about it. I am a walker. I like to walk. There is no place that I can walk that I'm not going to get killed. I used to walk Pequannock with 2 kids in a stroller, and I would walk all the way from South Street to Rockland and back, and I never feared for my life. I can't walk from my house to Round Table or from my house to the corner of South Street without these cars whipping around to beat the traffic on 106. It's just really, really bad. And I know that you don't want to pay for a traffic study, but I really beg you not to add any more density until you can see what the impact is already on the board that we already have here.
Okay, thank you,
None
Maria.
of these
Do we
houses
let
have
other people
cars in
speak,
it,
or would
and
you
if
like to
every,
continue?
if every
Shut her off.
Yeah, Jesse, we're just moving on between people. Maria has expressed her views before, and I'm sure she will again. So we appreciate her presence, but we have to, give everyone a chance to speak.
Okay, I don't see any more raised hands at the moment.
You shut the fuck off, you bastards.
Excuse me, who is that?
Jesse, we'll just mute you right now, please.
I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry, I did not realize that she
Yeah, you had
was
it open for a while.
sorry.
Okay, let's go back to the questions. If you would please refrain from using expletives during the meeting, we'd appreciate it, but also appreciate your passion here. Let's see, we had traffic. I think we heard about that. Okay, here's a question from Denise. Is it possible to restrict multifamily in any way that allows SF fee simple ownership as opposed to apartments? Judy, I think the answer to that is a no, because the state has made this requirement.
So it's also not a zoning matter. You can't use zoning to regulate form of occupancy.
So at the same time, someone could come with a non multifamily, like some sort of like singular ownership structure, if they could somehow figure that density out, like condos.
It's yeah, it could be apartments, it could be ownership. You can't use zoning to regulate that.
Right. And if I could be clear, Peter, because I think this is what you might be saying. The zoning can allow other uses. It just has to allow multifamily by right. So it can still allow single family housing in the district. It just can't restrict multifamily, and it can't indicate that multifamily has to be like an ownership, like a condominium.
Okay.
And we recognize there's a need for that.
Okay. Let's see, Denise, another question. The acreage of land on the east of Robert Drive and the acreage on the west side of Robert Drive. I don't know if maybe Wayne has that there. He just grab that for us quickly.
We don't have it.
We don't have that offhand.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll have that for the next meeting. We'll have that next time, right? Or we'll get back to Denise with that figure, please.
We will post answers on the website, Peter,
Okay,
so
yeah,
everyone,
sounds good.
it's available.
Yeah, that
for
makes sense.
everyone. Yeah.
Okay, Chris Lockheed. I have a major concerns about traffic on Foundry Street. I think we might have already heard from him. I live on South Street. It can take 5 to 10 minutes to pull out onto Foundry. Currently, people feel they're out there, tires constantly pulling into oncoming traffic, and it's already unsafe. There are 30 plus homes already under construction in the area. Can the area maintain a major road development? Yeah, well, we've been talking a lot about traffic, and we'll talk more about traffic. Do the existing 290 Avalon units and or 30 Belmont Arms units count towards the 913 count? Judy, what's the answer there? No, but the land itself can, well, any land in the zones that counts towards.
It's
right?
the zoned capacity, not what's already there.
Right.
Right. So if someone thought they could make money by tearing down Avalon and building 300 units, then, well, good for them, but it's not likely to happen. Let's see. My concern is anonymous attendee.
Yes, could we ask them to identify themselves, Peter?
Yeah, next time, if you don't mind, when you're in the chat, just identify yourself, please. My concern is senior housing. Is it a possibility to build more senior housing in any of these areas? Our elderly residents are in great need of it. I had a friend mention that the other day. She works for like an agency that deals with that. But Judy, that's the state is not actually allowing that as part of this, right?
Someone could propose senior housing. You just can't require zoning.
So it could be age restricted. We just can't say it has to be age restricted.
That is correct.
Okay, that's a good thing. And, while we can't, I don't know, I'm not even a really super proponent of this anyways, but if it happens, then there are ways the town could kind of, say that, oh, we think senior housing would be a good idea here. And sometimes that things just happen, but that's getting.
I mean, if a
cart before the
developer
horse,
came and asked for ideas and thoughts and what,
Mhm.
because they do, we do
Yeah,
get developers.
that's what I
Last
mean.
what the
Yep,
town like to see here, we can always say there is a need for.
Yes, right, correct. Yep, and that's an issue that we kind of brought up a few months ago. And there aren't, we have some options on the table there to kind of work in that direction. Will public transportation to the train stations be created? Now, no, that's not part of this. It's possible, but that would kind of some of the regional transportation agencies and Judy and Stephanie, there's not really any big impetus to start new connections until maybe more things happen, right?
We've had conversations with
Mhm.
Matt in Brockton, and if we can demonstrate a need
Mhm.
and a population that is looking for
Yep.
public transit, then they will talk to us. We'll start having serious conversations. It's something we're always looking to.
Yes.
So if we do see a lot of development there, then we can start having conversations with GATRA and with the BAT.
Yep. Okay. And then Denise Higgins asks again about the acreage of the two sides. So I don't know, whatever you can do to make available, like, more detailed. I mean, I know the map we have has the lot sizes, so people could, if we had something that people could actually look at themselves, or I guess it's, and kind of maybe have some way to answer those questions for people, please. Can we change the speed limit on 106? Who decides that? That's the state decision there, or is that a town, like a select safety commission?
That would be, it's not a state highway in that
Mhm.
portion between Belmont Street and Eastman Street. So it would be something that you could pose to the, I think it's called the Traffic Safety Commission. It consists of the chiefs and the DPW director. But
Yep.
that could be something that could be looked into. We do have Stacy has raised her hand.
Okay. Welcome, Stacy. Please state your full name and your address for the record.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think I've allowed her. Unmute.
I think Stacy might currently be muted on her machine. Nope. Stacy, are you able to press the unmute button, which is usually down towards the bottom of the screen, maybe the bottom left? There's a mute, picture of a microphone. Okay, well, I'm going to answer one of the Q&As, but when you figure out how to unmute yourself, then you will be ready to speak. Back to the chat here. Mr. Carrister had a question in the chat, if I can find my way back. Oh, there it is. Stephanie, do you have that last question in the chat there? It's not coming up.
Yes, Dale wants to confirm that at least one of the additional 3 meetings will be in person, so that those folks who are not computer savvy can also participate. And yes, Dale, we'll talk about the meetings at the end, but right now we think 2 of the next 3 meetings will be in person.
Yep. Yeah, we thought, like some virtual meetings would accommodate people that might have different schedules or prefer to be online, and then we'll have some public meetings in person as well, to kind of accommodate everyone's preference. Yep.
So it looks like we may have lost Stacy,
Okay.
maybe trying to like re-enter.
Okay, let's give her a minute. Otherwise, we have answered the Q&A thus far, and there are no other hands raised. If you want to get into maybe the upcoming schedule, and then we'll just kind of recognize anyone else that has more questions or raises their hand as time is.
I can bring that
15
slide
minutes
up.
or so. Yep.
I'll bring that slide up.
Okay.
Okay, so the next 3 meetings, we're going to be holding a kind of an open house on December 5th. And then another probably Zoom meeting on February 13th. And then another session in person, another open house style meeting April 9th. At the December 5th and the April 9th, there'll be a similar format. What we're thinking is we'll have poster boards with the different areas. We'll have the language of the proposed zoning available, and we will be there. We'll have planning board members. I will be there. Judy will be there and Wayne Beitler, the community planner, will be there to answer questions. February 13th, we'll probably do a kind of a review of the comments that we've heard and discussion on the districts in more detail.
Yeah. So thanks everyone for coming. I mean, I think the real important thing to remember here is that, you know, even like just the planning board members, we all have different ideas on this too, right? We don't completely agree on anything. And same between us and between the town staff. You know, we all have our own ideas, as do some of the attendees who voiced their feelings today. So you know, we'll continue to have these meetings, and we're listening to you. And I hear a few of you loud and clear. I'm one of 5 at the planning board, and one of many at the town meeting. But we'll do our best to consider everyone's concerns.
Yeah.
So,
and I just want to say the in-person meetings are going to be run over. So we're thinking, and we'll publish these with the final dates and the locations, but the December 5th will probably run from 5 to 7. That will give people enough time to come in and out. And then the April 9th meeting will probably go 6 to 8. But again, we will post these on the webpage, and they will all be posted on the town's calendar. We'll send out notifications like we did for this meeting in the town crier and on the town news item, as well as the Facebook page.
great. Okay, well, seeing as that's about the end of everyone's presentation, and seems like the questions have ended. Thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you at the next planning and zoning board, maybe a selectman meeting if you have some concerns. Otherwise at the next information session or around town. So thanks. Goodbye.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.